Security Breach is undoubtedly the most complicated entry into the Five Nights at Freddy's saga so far, and with a DLC for the game right around the corner, we don't have much time left to truly solve the mysteries this game has presented to us. Security Breach is a tough nut to crack, mainly because the lore of the game is so broad and much of the story is left intentionally ambiguous. Despite this, it is possible to take a more focused look at a singular aspect of the lore in order to get a better grasp on the broader story the game is trying to tell. Today, we're specifically looking at Vanny and Vanessa and attempting to answer the question, are they the same person? It's such a deceptively simple question, but make no mistake, this mystery is complex and has had me scratching my head for the past year and a half since the game was initially released. But now I think I've finally cracked the code, and I'm excited to share my findings with you. What I've found could have some massive implications going into the DLC. But first, I want to talk a bit about canon. FNaF has a very confusing canon. Without Scott Cawthon himself giving us the thumbs up on what is and isn't canon, theorizing has become a much more complex guessing game, because now not only are you unsure of the answer to the mysteries put forward by the games, but we're also having to pick and choose which evidence we can use from all the corners of the franchise. When theorizing about the games, of course everything that happens inside those games is canon. Likewise, all the stuff that happens around the games or is made to promote the games reasonably should also be considered canon, like the trailers and Scott Games teasers. But the debate starts to become complex when we consider a game like Special Delivery, a game which, by all means, is a non-canon spin-off. But then there are the story emails in the game which feature characters like Vanessa and Lewis, both of which who return in Security Breach in some way. There are also references in Security Breach to characters from the emails, like Jimmy House from DLZ Shipping Solutions. It's important to note that with this example in particular, the emails involving Jimmy were never publicly released. But then there are the books. The books are a difficult one, the reason being that we do have an answer from the big man himself on whether or not they're canon. The answer is yes, they are canon, but in a different way. The books are 100% canon to the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, but they exist in a separate continuity or timeline, meaning that events that take place in one of the book's continuities, for example the events of the Silver Eyes trilogy, do not necessarily happen in the game's continuity. This obviously doesn't mean that the books are useless when we're theorizing. Many of the Fazbear Fright's short stories and epilogues have given us clues on some very major parts of the FNaF story that we previously hadn't thought much about. The most obvious example would have to be Jake and Andrew from the Fazbear Fright's epilogues both possessing the Stitch Wraith, which allowed us to put together that in the game universe, Golden Freddy may be possessed by two spirits instead of just one.
Was that the bite?
This obviously doesn't mean that everything in the books will one day be used in the games. For example, I don't see Fazgoo showing up in the game's story anytime soon, much to my own disappointment. With all that said, you might already know what I'm about to say. A big part of this theory is that I won't be using any of the books to support it. There seem to be a lot of people who don't think it's even possible to make an accurate FNaF theory without the books, but I'm here to disagree. I've read some of the more recent stories that have made a stir in the community, such as GGY, but again, I won't be looking to that story to answer the questions Security Breach puts forward. Using the books makes things messy really quickly, because you have to second guess everything from the books that you plan on using. By just letting the books go for a moment, I believe we can better focus on what the game is trying to tell us. With that preamble out of the way, let's establish some background with Vanny. Vanny was first introduced in FNaF Help Wanted's DLC, The Curse of Dreadbear, back in October 2019. Her appearance was not by name, but as a secret that could be unlocked by collecting 5 keys in the Corn Maze minigame. Upon collecting the 5th key, the player would then head to the center of the map and unlock a trapdoor into an underground area where Vanny's rabbit mask would be waiting to be collected. After finding the mask, it would then be unlocked in the prize corner. If at this point you had also finished the base game story and had access to the small glitch trap toy, you could hold it while wearing the mask and hear Vanny for the first time.
Yes, I hear you. I know. No, there's no miscommunication. Yes, I have it. I made it myself. I think you would like it. No one suspects anything. Don't worry, I'll be ready. And I won't let you down. It will be fun.
Thanks to a teaser on scottgames.com, we later learned that this character's name was Vanny, but that was only the beginning. Another new character was then introduced to us through a teaser, a security guard, and fast forward to a piece of merchandise revealing that this security guard's name was Vanessa. The link here was obvious. with Vanny and Vanessa both sharing a name that starts with the letters V-A-N, as well as the story emails from FNaF Special Delivery revealing that Vanessa was in fact the main character of Help Wanted, it was hard to not think that the two characters were one and the same. However, the following trailers for Security Breach established Vanny to be the main antagonist of the new game, and Vanessa as the player's companion. Clearly, the benefit of the doubt was being afforded to Vanessa. Maybe she's a good guy after all, and maybe she and Vanny aren't the same. But at the time, most people agreed that they were most likely the same. The truth wouldn't reveal itself until the game came out in 2020. Fast forward to December 2021, Security Breach is finally released after a handful of delays that were made to ensure the quality of the game. Yep. Security Breach didn't end up giving us a straight answer regarding Vanny and Vanessa. Most of the time the game plays into Vanessa and Vanny being the same, but then moments like the fire escape ending, as well as other minor details, imply the opposite. So what gives? Let's see what we can take from the game to prove the hypothesis that Vanny and Vanessa are the same person. The Princess Quest ending, or the good ending, of Security Breach is really as far as we need to look for our proof. In this ending, we play through the Princess Quest 3 arcade cabinet after already having finished the first and second. The environment of the game is a recreation of the Help Wanted pizzeria. After fighting through hordes of enemies and collecting both a glitch trap plushie and the Vanny mask, seem familiar, we can go backstage to find a big metal door with a large lock. Again, a familiar sight if you've played through or seen the ending to Help Wanted. We open the door and hear a scream with a glitch effect echo out as the game fades away. The ending sequence then plays out as a comic. The staff bots that were under Vanny's control are deactivated, the Vanny mask has been tossed to the floor, and then Vanessa greets Gregory warmly at the entrance of the Pizzaplex. Skip past the credits and you get a scene of Vanessa, Freddy and Gregory sitting on a hill watching the sunrise. The implication of all this is that by completing the Princess Quest 3 game, we set Vanessa's soul free from Glitchtrap's control by somewhat symbolically but also metaphysically opening the locked door that Vanessa's soul was trapped behind. Vanny was a persona that took hold of Vanessa against her own will, which is why we see the mask that represents Vanny tossed on the ground during the ending. If this wasn't the case, and Vanessa and Vanny were indeed separate characters, this ending wouldn't make sense. Why would Vanessa have anything to do with this ending if she wasn't the soul trapped behind the big metal door in Help Wanted and Princess Quest 3? Up until this point in the game, Vanessa is quite nasty towards Gregory, even when she isn't in character as Vanny.
Why, you little brat. Come on out, you little monster.
Having her suddenly be all smiley and happy and willing to get some frozen treats with Gregory in the ending wouldn't make sense unless the act of completing Princess Quest 3 was doing her a favour. We can look beyond Princess Quest in order to prove that Vanessa is possessed by Glitchtrap by looking at the real meat of Security Breach's lore, the retro CDs, which I've listened to more times than I can count. In tape 11, Vanessa's therapist asks her about a costume she's making, and Vanessa gives a rather haunting response.
I can't talk about this. He said he would always be watching. He could be here, or there, or anywhere in between.
We can pretty easily conclude that whoever Vanessa is talking about is Glitchtrap. Here or there or anywhere in between sounds like she's concerned about someone or something always watching her, making sure she doesn't say the wrong thing. In the same tape, the therapist recommends Vanessa use a form of self-dialogue in order to get over her past, and Vanessa responds by simply saying, "I don't like doing that." This is another clue that suggests that Glitchtrap exists in Vanessa's mind. Self-dialogue doesn't work if someone is always listening to you or even responding to you. And all this is not to mention that the costume in question from before is most likely the Vanny costume we see in Security Breach, again tying Vanessa to Vanny even closer. Now I could keep going on about smaller details like how in the special delivery emails Vanessa's favourite flavour of cake is bunny-shaped. What? Or how Lewis comments on some of Vanessa's internet search terms that have triggered red flag reports, such as how far can a human be cut in half before losing consciousness, how to induce self-compliance, as well as help, just on its own, which is enough to suggest that she isn't in control. But all this should really be enough to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Vanny and Vanessa are the same. In fact, why did we even need to waste all this time going through evidence when Freddy himself in-game already gave us his accurate game theory?
Vanny. It is very similar to Vanessa, and also Bunny. That cannot be a coincidence.
I've got to be honest here. This line is weird, because Freddy's right. We just went through why and how Vanessa and Vanny are one and the same. Freddy is on the money with this one, but that only serves to make everything more confusing. It feels strange for the game to outright tell us the answer to such an important mystery, especially considering Security Breach easily has the most complex lore of any entry into the series so far, way outpacing the confusing nature of FNAF 4. I think the on-the-nose nature of Freddy's line here is a subtle hint that there's more to the mystery than we thought at first. In other words, yes, Freddy's right, but he hasn't solved the whole mystery. I get the feeling there's more going on here than we realise. Let's go back in time, back to before Security Breach came out. A lot of the news we got for Security Breach didn't come through official teasers on Scott's website, but instead in the form of official or sometimes leaked merchandise. The Funko statue that revealed Vanessa's name is really where this whole mystery began, and with that statue you see Vanny and Vanessa existing in the same place at the same time as separate entities. A poster that leaked showing a handful of characters from the game again shows Vanny and Vanessa as separate people. In this image in particular, Vanessa is framed in the center of the image running opposite the animatronics and Vanny, implying not only that they're different characters, but that they're diametrically opposed to one another. It's also quite jarring to go back and watch the initial gameplay trailer for Security Breach, wherein Vanessa is certainly framed to be one of the game's protagonists working alongside Gregory.
They won't stop hunting you. None of them will stop hunting you. Gregory, we can get you out of here. You and me together. We have to get you out by morning.
All these lines paint Vanessa as a sympathetic character who's intent on saving Gregory from the animatronics. So on one hand, we have a lot of pre-release evidence that suggests that Vanessa and Vanny aren't the same, but all that conflicts with the evidence we went over earlier to prove that Vanny and Vanessa are the same as a result of Vanessa becoming possessed by Glitch Trap. Now we have a problem. Vanny can't both be and not be Vanessa. That just doesn't make any sense. How about we take another look in-game to see if we can solve these inconsistencies, instead of just writing them off as the result of old or scrapped content. The fire escape ending is a point of contention regarding the debate surrounding Vanny and Vanessa. In the ending, Gregory and Freddy come face to face with Vanny on the rooftop of the Mega Pizzaplex. In order to save Gregory and make sure Vanny is no longer a threat to him, Freddy tackles Vanny off the roof of the building, sending her seemingly to her death. It is a long way to fall. Gregory rushes down to see the aftermath of the event and decides to remove Vanny's mask, revealing that Vanessa was Vanny this whole time. But if it were that simple, this video wouldn't exist. Skip forward past the credits and we get a final scene showing Vanessa at the top of the burning Pizzaplex looking down at the aftermath of what just took place. It's still unclear what this ending is exactly trying to tell us. The possibility that there are two characters who both look alike and that this scene exists to tell us that Vanny and Vanessa aren't the same person is one idea. Other theorists have proposed the idea that this isn't the real Vanessa, and is instead just an apparition of the now dead Vanessa haunting the Pizzaplex because her soul still belongs to Glitch Trap in the ending. As unsatisfying as it is, I don't think I have an answer as to what this ending is trying to tell us, but maybe there is something to the idea of there being two separate characters. We'll come back to this ending later. Something from Security Breach I've seen very few people bring attention to is the two canvas paintings that exist in the Pizzaplex. One of them exists in the backstage area behind Rockstar Row in a side room. The painting is of a white rabbit against a pink background and includes what may be an initial in the bottom right, a V. Obvious parallel is obvious. The painting of a white rabbit as well as the initial V ties it very neatly to Vanny. She's most likely the one who painted it. But there's one more painting in the Pizzaplex that doesn't have a simple tie to any character we know like the other painting does. It can be found in the sewers in the Staffbot silo next to the Afton family diorama. The image itself is hard to make out. It doesn't resemble anything obvious and its placement in the Staffbot silo is strange. By going into the files we can learn that the name of this painting is Alberi di Legno. Those of you with a sharp mind might be able to spot that this actually isn't English. This painting's title roughly translates from Italian to wooden trees. When looking back at the painting, this doesn't really describe it that well, unless of course we rotate the painting to the side. Here we can see it much better resembles a couple of trees during what looks to be autumn, that's fall for the Americans, and that large yellow circle, well, it makes sense for that to be the sun. So while we don't know who this painting belongs to exactly, there are a few things we can learn about the artist. We know that the painting exists in the Staffbot silo, meaning whoever made it also occupies the room at some point. We know there's only one other canvas painting like it in the Pizzaplex that was most likely painted by Vanny, which possibly also ties this painting to her as well. The autumn trees are a particular detail from the painting that could also tie it to Vanny, because the most recent use of an autumn or Halloween aesthetic is in the Curse of Dreadbear DLC for Help Wanted, which is where we first learned about Vanny, meaning that this painting in Security Breach might also be from her. This would make sense as the Staffbot silo seems to be where the normal Staffbots are being modified into the Nightmare variants. We know these variants undoubtedly belong to Vanny, as the only other time we see them is in the Vanny ending in her locked off portion of the Fazablast utility tunnels. Pre-release map knowledge helps here to prove that. The level 12 door is a strange find at first, but it makes sense to be blocking entry into Vanny's portion of the basement, as we know that she's capable of changing security permissions around the Pizzaplex.
Those are the loading dock controls. Something is not right. Someone must have changed the permissions.
She likely increased the security clearance on that door in order to keep people out, but that doesn't tell us much, least of all what these two paintings are meant to communicate to theorists. So considering all this, there's confusion about whether or not Vanny and Vanessa are separate entities in this story. We have pre-release merchandise showing them separately, as well as trailers that separate the two by showing Vanessa to be a force for good, as well as the fire escape ending possibly pointing towards the idea that they are separate characters. But then evidence from earlier clearly shows us that Vanessa is Vanny, and that they are the same person. That's something we can't ignore. So in this situation where the answer to are Vanny and Vanessa the same person seems to be yes half the time and no the other, maybe there's a world where both can be true. A world where there are two characters, Vanny and Vanessa, but where Vanessa can still be Vanny. In that world, there would be two Vannys. Returning to the canvas paintings from before, maybe that's why they exist. Maybe this is what they are there to tell us, that there are two characters and both of them are sharing the role of Vanny. Returning in-game, one detail really stuck out to me. Vanny has two hideouts in the Pizzaplex, which seems somewhat redundant at first when you run off the assumption that Vanny is just one character, but having two beds split among two characters and two canvas paintings, mind you, which both can be tied to Vanny, but are each painted with a completely different level of artistic skill, the hypothesis of two Vannys starts to seem like less of a reach, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. Ruin is slated to release very soon, so is there any evidence in the most recent teasers for the DLC that there are two Vannys? Well, yes, actually I think there is. The poster that was released to reveal the DLC was a much bigger deal than most gave it credit for. There are a lot of things hidden throughout the artwork that proves that a lot of care was put into small but clearly deliberate details. One example, unrelated to Vanny, would be the girl in the center of the image. If you bring up the saturation in the image, it becomes clear that the girl, unlike the rest of the image, is in black and white. But if you look down, you can see the lights on her shoes do have color, which further brings attention to the girl's lack of color. Another detail that few people have taken notice of involves the pair of red eyes in the top left corner of the image. These eyes could really only belong to two characters, Vanny or Moondrop. What many people have either not noticed or hesitated to take note of is the second pair of red eyes in the top right of the image. I don't blame you if you can't see them. Even when turning up the exposure and the saturation and making all sorts of other modifications to the image, it's still hard to see, but there are, unmistakably, another set of red eyes in the top right. Now before the trailer for Ruin was released, you could easily have brushed this detail off as top left Vanny, top right Moondrop, or vice versa. But after seeing the Ruin trailer, we know that the daycare attendant doesn't have two red eyes anymore. Instead, one is red and the other is yellow. So who could this second set of red eyes belong to? A doppelganger Vanny? I think it's likely. Let's go back in time now to Help Wanted. In the game there are 16 devlogs from a QA tester at Silver Parasol Games who uses her tapes to detail the issues involving the glitch trap virus and how it's infected the VR game. In one of her logs, the tape girl briefly mentions a client that sent them vintage circuit boards to scan into the game. She also accuses the client of breaking into their office during the night.
Someone was definitely here during the night. It had to have been the client. They sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it. It was just junk. Circuit boards and things like that.
After scanning the circuit board sent by the client, the glitch trap virus appears and begins tormenting another QA, Jeremy.
Things started changing. But then, he started appearing. At least that's what Jeremy said.
The question now becomes, who's the client? Whoever they are, their intentions when sending the circuit boards to Silver Parasol must be malicious in nature. They're definitely someone who knows about the virus and intends to incorporate it into the VR experience. If Vanessa were the client, that would mean she would be an inherently evil character from the start, preceding her possession. But this wouldn't make sense if we're led to believe that Vanessa only does acts of evil when she's possessed. There's a lot to back up the idea that Vanessa is inherently good when she isn't possessed. The Princess Quest ending is something I'd yet again point to, as well as Retro CD 11, which shows us that Vanessa is afraid of Glitchtrap. But there's plenty of evidence to support this fact in Help Wanted too. Vanessa becomes possessed by Glitchtrap at the end of Help Wanted, but this possession likely wasn't intentional. The tape girl tells us by the final tape that there is a way to kill the virus. During some of the earlier tapes, the tape girl makes it clear that Vanessa is also a beta tester for the game, so getting rid of Glitchtrap would be part of her job. The tape girl tells us that in order to kill the Glitchtrap virus, we have to flush the game's memory when it attempts to merge with us.
Let it approach you. Let it begin to merge with you. Play the music and flip the switch. That will cause a hard restart of the game and flush the memory, effectively killing it.
When doing this successfully, the end result is being possessed by Glitchtrap and locked behind a big metal door. We, as the player, are tricked, and this calls into question the possibility that Vanessa, the character we are playing as, was also tricked. An important thing I want to bring light to is what happens if we fail to follow the tape girl's instructions on how to kill Glitchtrap. A game over. Death. Presumably the same fate that took Jeremy. If it's true that Vanessa was tricked into possession, that would make her innocent. If Vanessa is innocent, then she can't be the client. So it's a good thing we've already established someone else who can. Vanny. Some people might argue that the client who sent the circuit boards might be the new CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, but I don't think this is possible. While yes, it's very clear that Fazbear Entertainment knows about the virus, every action they've taken regarding it has been in an effort to minimize the damage it causes, or even to get rid of it. Fazbear Entertainment stops all work with subcontractors who have been sent vintage circuit boards, and the moment a worker at Silver Parasol comes face to face with Glitchtrap, Fazbear Entertainment stops Silver Parasol from working on the game and seemingly sends it to be finished in-house instead. All this seems to suggest that the client sent the circuit boards to Silver Parasol without Fazbear Entertainment knowing. The old trailers for Security Breach have some supporting evidence for the existence of two Vannies as well. The first thing I'll point to is an age-old line from the first gameplay trailer.
Do as I say. You will bring me what I want, and if you fail me, then you will, both of you, burn!
This is a cut line of Matthew Curtis playing William Afton in whatever form he's in. Unfortunately, like a lot of things, Matthew's voice work was cut from Security Breach, but this line is still interesting. In this scene, we can hear William talking to two other characters and commanding them to bring him what he wants. The question, still to this day, is who are the two people he's talking to? Well, it makes sense to assume that one of these characters is Vanny, and given our current hypothesis, the other would be Vanessa. If you're still working with the assumption that Vanny and Vanessa are just one character, then there really isn't anyone else who could be William's second lackey in this scene, at least not without making a boatload of assumptions. In that same trailer, Vanessa has the line, "There is more going on here than you realize," implying that she knows what's going on with the animatronics, and also seemingly Vanny's plan to rebuild William Afton. Assuming that if this line were actually in Security Breach, Vanessa was talking to Gregory here, as is implied throughout the whole trailer, that means that Vanessa is again being shown to be a force for good by helping Gregory, but is at the same time among Glitchtrap's ranks and still reluctantly doing his bidding. I suppose it is important to consider from a storytelling perspective that if Glitchtrap was only relying on Vanessa to bring him to life, then he would become helpless the moment she decides to mutiny. But if there was another player, Vanny in this case, then the threat of Glitchtrap is a whole lot more tangible. What's interesting is that Vanny doesn't have any lines in the gameplay trailer for Security Breach, but she does in the trailer that preceded it. In the first teaser trailer for the game, Vanny isn't voiced by the same actor as she is in Security Breach. In Security Breach, Vanny was voiced by Marta Svatek, but in this trailer, she's voiced by Stacey Young. The fact that Vanny has two very distinct voice actors is already another big red arrow that points to the two Vannys' conclusion. Let's talk about voice actors for a second, specifically the ones chosen for Vanessa and Vanny. You may not have known this, but spread between Vanny and Vanessa, they've shared 4 voice actors. If you're still working with the idea that they are the same person, no funny business, then you technically have 4 voice actors for one character. We have the reluctant follower voiced by Jessica Tang.
Yes, I hear you. No, there's no miscommunication.
Vanessa voiced by Heather Masters.
Hello, little boy! If you're down here, say something!
You've got to trust me.
Vanny in the first 2 Security Breach trailers voiced by Stacey Young, which might I add is some of the best voice work in the series.
Gregory, your friends are worried about you. They're here with me.
And finally, you have Vanny in-game for Security Breach voiced by Marta Svatek.
There you are. See you soon.
You could say some of these actors were cut or replaced, but what a convenient selection of actors to cut, right? For the character whose true identity is a mystery, these cuts are quite a coincidence. I don't think any of these actors were replaced in any way. Obviously, in the most recent game, Heather Masters is still Vanessa and Marta is Vanny, but in this situation, I think those two are playing the same character. Heather, of course, is Vanessa normally, and Marta is Vanessa when LARPing as Vanny. That then leaves the other two actors, and I think a similar solution applies here. Jessica Tang is the reluctant follower, and most likely also the client in Help Wanted. And again, when wearing the Vanny costume, her voice is modified, and then Stacey Young plays the character. In this situation, 4 voice actors can all fit into roles that still make sense. That brings me back to Help Wanted and the claim that I've just made. I've implied that the reluctant follower isn't Vanessa, despite the fact that we know we play as Vanessa in Help Wanted. Here's another hypothesis. I'm proposing the possibility that Help Wanted has 2 protagonists. One reason I say this is again to do with the voice acting. The reluctant follower doesn't sound anything like Vanessa. She sounds a lot younger and otherwise just has a very different sounding voice. Another reason involves the method by which the reluctant follower's voice line is heard in-game. In order to hear it, you have to wear the Vanny mask and hold the Glitch Trap plushie. A strange requirement. Vanessa, we know, is possessed by Glitch Trap and can talk with him whenever she wants, so it calls into question why holding the Glitch Trap plushie is necessary. The plushie is necessary to activate the voice line because whoever the reluctant follower is needs to be in direct contact with Glitch Trap in order to communicate with him, and the Vanny mask needs to be worn because it symbolizes us embodying a different character than Vanessa. You can't just pick up the plushie and have a conversation with it, you have to be wearing the mask in order to essentially switch characters. So now we ask the question we've been leading up to for the past half an hour. Where is this character in Security Breach? Who is the reluctant follower? Who is the client? Who is Vanny? The answer? Now let me address the elephant in the room. Yes, I'm completely aware of GGY and I understand that the story implies, in an extremely on-the-nose way, that Gregory is Patient 46. That could be true for the books, but the game is a different story. I'm not just saying that either. I have evidence that Gregory isn't Patient 46 in the games, and I'm going to prove it by using the games. We know that Patient 46 is younger than Vanessa. The therapists are constantly belittling them or treating them like a child, but we also know that they aren't a child. This line from the 16th tape should be proof enough that Patient 46 isn't a kid.
The truth is, you had great parents. A great childhood. Why did you lie?
Notice the past tense. Had a great childhood. In Security Breach, Gregory looks like he's no older than 10. Childhood isn't a thing he's had, it's something he's still in the middle of. And there's more. Lucky for us, Security Breach is localized in a few languages like Spanish, in which nouns have variations based on whether they describe a boy or a girl. In Tape 4, the therapist talking to Patient 46 calls them a troublemaker. In the Spanish subtitles for this line, the word troublemaker becomes alborotadora, which is the feminine variation of the word. Knowing this, it wouldn't make sense for Gregory to be Patient 46 if he's being addressed with feminine nouns. I promise, while we're going through the rest of this theory, I'll gradually give you a few more reasons why Gregory cannot be Patient 46, but we need to move on for the sake of time. So now that leads us to the retro CDs. There are 16 of them that you can find hidden throughout the Pizzaplex. Once you've collected them all, you can listen to their contents in a secret room in the utility tunnels, which resembles Michael Afton's home in Sister Location. The CDs themselves are recorded therapy sessions for Vanessa and the mysterious Patient 46, who never talks and whose name is never disclosed by the therapist. Throughout these recordings, Vanessa and Patient 46 are constantly being compared in some way. For example, in Tape 7, Vanessa is offered a candy and she immediately rejects it.
Hi, Vanessa. Would you like a candy? No, thank you.
On the contrary, in Tape 6, Patient 46 helps themselves to a candy without asking. It's pretty rude.
I've read your file, so I'm up to speed on what you and your previous therapists have worked on. Sure, you can have a candy.
During the course of the 16 tapes, the therapists counseling Vanessa and Patient 46 continue to disappear.
I don't know you. What happened to...
Oh, we'll get to know each other in no time.
By the end, 4 therapists are replaced, and it's implied that Patient 46 is the one responsible for their disappearances.
Why don't we come back to this another day? You're shaking your head as though that's not going to happen.
One of the therapists is even found dead at one point, which clues us in on the fates of the others. In the final few tapes, it's revealed that Patient 46 is responsible for hacking into the Pizzaplex's systems and allowing a virus to cause trouble. It's also revealed that Patient 46 has been communicating with and manipulating Vanessa, as well as accessing her patient files, and had attempted to lie about their past by plagiarizing Vanessa's tragic upbringing and adopting it as their own.
What you might not know is that this person who's been sending you messages has been hacking into your personal files too. These are the same files I have here.
The truth is, you had great parents. Why did you lie?
Alright, so before we go any further, we need to talk about the timeline. Yeah, okay. The first thing we need to get straight is that the retro CDs are recorded around the same time the FNaF special delivery emails are written. We know this because Vanessa's transfer to the Pizzaplex is a common event in both. In the retro CDs, Vanessa is about to transfer by tape 12.
I understand you'll be transferring to a different location soon. I'll be sorry to see you go.
And in one of the final emails, we see a list of Fazbear Entertainment employee transfers and layoffs for the fourth quarter, and in it, we can see Vanessa transferring from one job in security to another. Another common event is Vanessa purchasing fur material in order to make a costume. In tape 11, the therapist brings this up.
It looks like you were shopping for a costume. You purchased some fake fur material. What are you gonna make?
And in the character Lewis's final email to Vanessa, he mentions a package that's arrived for her from a fabric company. We also know that the Pizzaplex is open during this time. We know this because on top of Vanessa's job transfer, the therapists in the last few tapes also talk extensively about the Pizzaplex because of Patient 46's presence there. One thing we can also learn is what year exactly the emails and by association the retro CDs take place. In the emails, Vanessa's handle is Nessie97. On the internet, and in regards to usernames that use numbers at the end of them, like this, it's typical for people to choose either easy to remember numbers or numbers that are significant to them in some way. For a lot of people, the choice to use their birth year is an obvious one, because it's impossible to forget and also holds significance. I believe this to be the case here, especially considering Vanessa's handle is the only one with numbers in it across every email in the FNaF special delivery story. This tells me that the numbers are significant in some way. They aren't an accident. If we consider the digits in Vanessa's handle to be her birth year, it would make sense to assume that Vanessa was born in 1997. In an email with an attached company birthday list, we can also learn that Vanessa is 23 years old at this time, meaning that with a birth year of 1997, the emails were written in the year 2020. Oh no. Alarm bells are ringing. Anyone who knows anything about the past 8 years of FNaF lore is panicking because doesn't FNaF 3 take place in 2023? I'm going to try and keep this short, but the answer has to be no. The main thing we know about FNaF 3's timeline placement is that it takes place 30 years after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed its doors. The primary assumption has been that this means 30 years after FNaF 1, and with a very old speculated year for that game being 1993, people have assumed that 30 years after FNaF 1 is 2023, so FNaF 3 must take place in that year. This assumption is made without the consideration that in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, the pizzeria is likely closed. Just in general, the place is run down significantly more than any other open locations we've seen. Cobwebs everywhere, litter on the floor and water leaking down the walls. Even in the upcoming movie, the FNaF 1 location is depicted as abandoned. And I know I said I wouldn't do this, but I've got to get at least one in if it'll convince you. In the books, specifically the Silver Eyes trilogy, you have the same thing. A location with the original 4 animatronics that closely resembles the FNaF 1 pizzeria being abandoned. And in both cases, the books and the upcoming film, a security guard is hired to watch the premises of the abandoned location. Just like FNaF 1. There is a lot more evidence to support this fact, and if you want me to make a full video covering it, I'd be more than happy to, but I want to keep this segment as short as possible because this theory is about Vanny, not the timeline. That doesn't mean we're done with the timeline though. With this new hypothesis that the FNaF 1 location was never properly open to the public, that means the last Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location to be open before FNaF 3 is the FNaF 2 location, meaning that 30 years after 1987, FNaF 3 takes place in 2017. Now our timeline works with a 2020 date for the special delivery emails, but there are still a few things that have to happen between FNaF 3 and those emails. The first is Pizzeria Simulator, the next is Help Wanted, and the last is the construction of the Pizzaplex. I'll admit, that's a lot to fit into a 3 to 4 year time frame, but I do believe it can all fit in nice and snug. With Pizzeria Simulator, it makes sense for it to take place extremely soon after FNaF 3, maybe even a little as a few months after in the same year. We know that the Pizzaplex is built by the fourth quarter of 2020 thanks to the retro CDs and emails, so that gives FNaF Help Wanted and the construction of the Pizzaplex 2 to 3 years to take place. It makes sense to give roughly a year of the timeline to the reform of Fazbear Entertainment and the release of the VR game, putting Help Wanted around 2018-2019, which funnily enough is the same year FNaF Help Wanted released. And finally, the rest of the time could go to the construction of the Pizzaplex. I mean, come on, this is FNaF. Sister location exists. Don't act like building the Pizzaplex in a little over a year is absurd. So, we established the emails take place in 2020, but there's evidence to suggest that the CDs begin earlier than this and then overlap with the emails later in the timeline. In Tape 1, Vanessa's therapist asks her this question.
Well, now I understand there's a new issue. It came on just recently. Rather suddenly, you've spent quite a bit of time with someone in an encrypted conversation.
Now, this is in reference to Vanessa beginning her communication with Patient 46. It's safe to assume that, with Patient 46's involvement with the glitch trap virus, Vanessa's conversation with Patient 46 would begin shortly after the events of Help Wanted, when she gets roped into the whole situation with glitch trap, meaning the therapy tapes also begin shortly after the VR game. With everything here established, I want to return to an older point, specifically regarding the voice actors and even more specifically the reluctant follower. The old hypothesis that disregards the possibility of two Vannys runs with the idea that the reluctant follower is Vanessa, but younger because of a plausible time gap between Help Wanted and Security Breach. With our current timeline hypothesis though, the amount of time Vanessa's voice would have to go from this,
Yes, I hear you,
to this,
Lots of people know more than I do.
is only a few months, maybe even weeks. The fact again that the two voices are so different lends itself to the idea that these two are not the same character, despite both being Vanny in some way. Okay, that's enough talking about the timeline anymore and I might actually be sick. Now let's finally get into why it makes sense for Patient 46 to be Vanny. We've already established that Patient 46 is indeed a younger person. Not a child, but still younger than Vanessa. This conclusion is similar to the one we've come to with the reluctant follower, who we've now separated from Vanessa using the timeline as evidence. We know Vanny is the reluctant follower and sounds younger than Vanessa, which ties them directly to Patient 46 in that aspect. Next up, in Tape 15, Patient 46 does an ink blot test.
What do you see? You think it's a mask? It reminds you of a mask? You like the idea of being disguised? Disguises let you be sort of invisible, don't they? You can get away with almost anything when you're invisible, can't you?
A mask has obvious ties to Vanny. After all, that's how we were introduced to the character. It all seems in line with a character who operates undetected, as we see with the client sending Silver Parasol the vintage circuit boards under Fazbear Entertainment's nose. This makes sense considering one of the reluctant follower's goals is to remain unsuspected.
No one suspects anything.
And, connecting it back to Patient 46, they seem to be responsible for getting rid of Vanessa's therapists the moment they start to ask questions regarding Patient 46's conversations with her, seemingly in order to not get found out. One detail about Patient 46 that connects them to Vanny is their expertise regarding technology. We've already established that Vanny has to be the client who sends Silver Parasol the vintage circuit boards, meaning that Vanny has a good understanding of technology, tying her to Patient 46. We even see in the Ruin trailer an updated version of Vanny's original mask, which features some tech that would obviously have to be crafted by someone who is proficient in that area, which is seemingly quite unlike Vanessa.
I'm not in the tech department. I just type on the computers.
Finally, considering the nature of the retro CDs, it just makes sense for Patient 46 to be Vanny. Vanessa and Patient 46 are communicating with each other. The first few tapes with Vanessa make this abundantly clear.
You've spent quite a bit of time with someone in an encrypted conversation. The messages you're getting seem very manipulative in nature. Do you know who I'm talking about? According to these message logs, you've been working pretty late over the last couple of weeks. Or not working. Are you ready to talk about who you're interacting with?
Because the two characters, Vanny and Vanessa, were already being conflated before we heard these CDs, comparing the two just makes sense. The question that you have to ask is, why are these two being compared like this? Perhaps because otherwise it would be difficult to tell the two apart, at least with the evidence we have right now. especially if one of them is unlikely to show themselves if they aren't disguised in some way.
You like the idea of being disguised?
We don't get much from the therapists about patient 46's appearance, but there is one line which felt like it was trying to tell us something.
There, that's better. On this side of the desk, I can see your eyes.
This is the only mention of any of patient 46's physical features, which tells me that their eyes are an important part of their identity. This isn't new for the FNaF story either. In Sister Location, eye colour played a big part in identifying the spirit who possessed Circus Baby. Baby's eyes were originally blue, but when the green-eyed Elizabeth fell victim to the animatronic's design choices, the animatronic's eyes changed to green as well, showing us that the spirit of the girl had possessed the animatronic. Vanessa is a character with green eyes, but a one-off appearance in the 4th Freddy and Friends episode shows her with yellow eyes. Some have speculated that this indicates that she's being controlled by Glitchtrap, but that wouldn't be consistent with how other characters look in the same situation, for example Freddy during the final fight. This possibly means that whoever this is a freeze frame of, this is her natural eye colour, especially considering that there is no precedent for human eyes changing colour in the series. It's only ever animatronics whose eyes change colour. This finally brings me back to the fire escape ending. If, in this scene, the two Vanessas are indeed separate people, then perhaps the freeze frame of Vanessa in Freddy and Friends episode 4 is patient 46 and not Vanessa. The way I see it, both interpretations of the fire escape ending are plausible and don't change this theory too much. But if I had to choose, and this might surprise you, I'd go with the theory that the rooftop Vanessa is an apparition, a ghost, and you'll find out why very soon. But first, we need to figure out who the therapists in the retro CDs work for. One thing that's consistent with employees of Fazbear Entertainment are employee performance reviews. In the first tape, the therapist makes reference to Vanessa's performance reviews, and in the second tape, the therapist, when talking to patient 46, references her own performance reviews.
You know, everyone associated with this company gets performance reviews, right? When my sessions don't get results, my reviews aren't very good.
Another thing to point out is that, at least for Vanessa, her therapy sessions are company mandated, meaning that at the very least, every therapist who talks with Vanessa works for Fazbear Entertainment. It makes sense to assume that the therapists work for Fazbear Entertainment because not only do they have access to Vanessa's performance reviews, but they also have access to communications coming to her work computer. In the last few tapes with patient 46, the therapists begin interrogating them on reports they've received from technicians who work at the Pizzaplex, and seemingly on behalf of those technicians, to the point where those technicians are messaging the therapists about patient 46's suspected involvement with the Glitchtrap virus infecting the building's systems. So in that case, is patient 46 also working for Fazbear Entertainment during these tapes? It may be possible. In tape 2, when the therapist brings up their performance reviews, they say this.
You know, everyone associated with this company gets performance reviews, right?
By the therapist simply saying this company, it reveals that the therapist and patient 46 have a mutual knowledge of the company she's talking about. If the therapist and patient 46 were both working for Fazbear Entertainment to some degree, that creates that mutual understanding of the situation that allows the therapist to be ambiguous about this company. Vanessa's therapy tapes are all recorded in a Fazbear Entertainment building of some kind. Not a Freddy's restaurant or the Pizzaplex, but an office building. We know this building is the same place that Vanessa was working during the special delivery emails thanks to Lewis's presence, and it's possible that this could also be the building where the VR game was finished and where Vanessa became possessed by Glitchtrap. Regardless of all that, it's safe to say that all the tapes were recorded in this building, not just Vanessa's. This would work in favor of the idea that patient 46 is also working in the building. But can we prove it? This, to me, would be the final proof that patient 46 isn't Gregory, so let's see what we can find. Although the rooms aren't talked about much, there are certain small links between the locations of the recordings in the tapes themselves. In tape 6, patient 46 takes a candy, and in the following tape, tape 7, Vanessa rejects one. Although small, I still think it's enough to support the idea that both client sessions are happening in the same office. If we're to believe that these tapes are recorded in chronological order from 1 to 16, it makes sense for the two tapes featuring these candies to be close together in the chronology, and further solidifies the connection between the location of patient 46 and Vanessa's therapy sessions. In tape 4, patient 46 is aggravated by the scent of some flowers that have been left in the office.
What's the problem? Oh, the flowers? Yes, these are particularly fragrant today, aren't they? I'll move them.
Later, in tape 9, Vanessa takes a liking to a bouquet of flowers that were left in the room. Now, this would also be small potatoes if the flowers weren't given a backstory in the same tape.
Apparently, the janitor on this floor has a garden and has been putting bouquets in the offices here for years.
We know the flowers aren't a typical fixture of the room, as patient 46 is only bothered by them in their second tape, not the first. In between those tapes, the janitor in question is placing the bouquet in the office just as the therapist explains to Vanessa when the flowers appear for her session. It's also important to note that Vanessa and patient 46 have the same 3 therapists up until Vanessa transfers. It's incredibly unlikely for the 2 patients to be seeing the same 3 therapists in different locations. One other thing that's typical of the employees of Fazbear Entertainment is that everything that they do online is reviewed by the IT department. We see this with Vanessa in the tapes, with IT looking in on her encrypted conversation with patient 46, and in the emails with Lewis receiving reports on her suspicious internet search terms. The same thing happens with patient 46 in tapes 14 and 15. In tape 14, the therapist discusses one of patient 46's encrypted conversation logs, something she realistically wouldn't have access to unless she was working for patient 46's employer. This goes even further in tape 15, where the therapist talks about a report regarding patient 46.
I have another report we need to talk about. Apparently, the techs were reviewing communications going in and out of this building, and they came across some interesting things. They say you were in communication with someone.
Here, the therapist specifies that the communications were coming out of this building, the same building that the therapy session is taking place in, meaning patient 46 often spends their time here. As the tape continues, the therapist moves on to a still shot that the same techs pulled from the Pizzaplex security footage showing patient 46 in the building. For the techs who were able to acquire patient 46's communications before to also have access to the Pizzaplex's security footage, they themselves would have to be working for Fazbear Entertainment. And the final thing to consider is why both Vanessa and patient 46's sessions with the therapists end. For Vanessa, it's simple. Her sessions stop when she transfers from the Fazbear Entertainment building to the Pizzaplex. The thing about patient 46 is that we aren't really given a reason as to why their sessions are over after tape 16. Considering we've essentially proven that both client sessions are recorded in the same building, it would make sense to assume that patient 46's sessions come to a stop for a similar reason. Not necessarily a job transfer, but just that patient 46 disappears and stops attending their sessions. Most likely because by the final tape they're in hot water with the techs pressing them on their involvement with the virus in the Pizzaplex, and with the final therapist beginning to see through patient 46's lies. So if patient 46's sessions end because they disappear, where could they have run off to? Surely the Pizzaplex is our best bet, but where in the Pizzaplex? Remember how I briefly touched on Vanny having 2 different hideouts in the Pizzaplex? Well, as I mentioned before, it makes sense for these 2 beds to belong to separate characters. Now that we're working with 2 Vannys, we can associate 1 to each hideout respectively. We know the bed in Phasablast belongs to Vanessa primarily because of the Princess Quest ending. Additionally, in the brief cutscene before the Vanny boss fight, the Vanny that we're up against is voiced by Marta Svatek. And if you remember how we hypothesized Vanny and Vanessa's 4 voice actors to be organized, Marta is the voice of Vanessa but modified by the costume, so this hideout is Vanessa's. But coming back to the point about the voice actors raises an interesting question. Stacey Young and Jessica Tang are the voices for the other Vanny, patient 46, who is also the reluctant follower, and the client as we've now established. But the thing is, neither of them has a single line in Security Breach, which means patient 46 is seemingly totally absent from the game. Well, that's where the second hideout, underneath the underground pizzeria, comes into play. I believe that we can prove this bed belongs to patient 46, but the first thing we need to talk about is what's happening underneath the pizzeria in the first place. When we get there in-game, and upon falling into the room below the pizzeria, we learn that somehow William Afton returned. The Vanny, who owns the bed here, has been rebuilding William's destroyed form to bring him back from the dead. Again. As we covered earlier, technology, and especially robotics, is never implied to be one of Vanessa's strong suits. Patient 46, on the other hand, is a different story. In tape 14, we get some more information on this.
I saw in your file that you have developed software programs that talk to you in repeat phrases, right? The program asks you questions and prompts you for responses. It's kind of like your own self-therapy, isn't it?
We also know that patient 46 is the one spreading the glitch trap virus throughout the Pizzaplex, so who better than them to be bringing William Afton back to life here? Remember the candy bit from the retro CDs?
Hi, Vanessa. Would you like a candy?
No, thank you. Those have 35 calories apiece.
This tells us something about Vanessa in that she's careful about what she eats. She likes to stay healthy. Obviously, on the contrary, you have patient 46 with no real discipline regarding their diet.
Sure, you can have a candy.
Yeah, I hear you. Where on earth is this going? Security Breach is a big fan of environmental storytelling. The props that make up a room give each area its own little story. With Security Breach, these details are never an accident, so it's interesting to me that when we look around the bed underneath the pizzeria, what do we see? Empty pizza boxes, crushed cans of fizzy faz and packets of junk food. As ridiculous as this point is, all the unhealthy food and drink around the bed seems to suggest, based on what we know about Vanessa and patient 46's eating habits, that the owner of the bed is patient 46. Another detail regarding what we now know as patient 46's hideout that came to my attention very early on when making this theory is the wall covered with tally marks next to their bed. Tally marks are a very common trope in media to show the passing of time, typically for someone who is trapped or imprisoned. This could explain why patient 46 doesn't show up in Security Breach, because during the duration of the game, they're still trapped underground, beneath the pizzeria. But how do we know that they're still down there? After all, we don't ever see them during the Burn Trap boss fight or the ending. Well, we don't need to look much further than the lit candles on the ground beside the bed. Candles typically burn out completely after a few hours of use, and especially candles of this size wouldn't last any longer than a day. For these candles to be lit when we arrive in game, someone would have had to light them within the last 12 hours at the most, and it likely wasn't Burn Trap because he's having a big snooze when we show up. So what is it keeping patient 46 trapped underground? Well, the question that remains is, how? Not how is the blob keeping patient 46 trapped underneath the pizzeria, because the answer to that question is pretty obvious. No, how did all of this end up happening? Patient 46 runs off to hide in the pizzaplex, but how does that lead to them getting trapped in a structure underneath a pizzeria that itself is buried under the pizzaplex? When we go to the underground pizzeria for the first time, Freddy has this to say.
I know what this is. I have been here before. She brought me here. I found myself for the first time when I cleared the path.
Freddy's playing the pronoun game here, but it's safe to say after all we've covered that this mysterious female is patient 46. What's important about this line is Freddy telling us that he cleared the path. It makes sense for this to be in regards to Freddy clearing a safe path down the sinkhole in the pizzeria's floor so that patient 46 can easily access the structure below it. We can assume this because Freddy's line doesn't trigger until we begin descending the aforementioned hole. What Freddy's describing here is patient 46's earliest visit to the area underneath the pizzeria, where she would begin to work on rebuilding William Afton. The blob likely isn't sitting dormant in the hole at this time. It's reasonable to assume that if the blob was there at this time, patient 46 wouldn't be able to get past it in order to access the underground structure. So no blob at this point, which means patient 46 would still be able to freely go to and from the underground structure at will. After Freddy and patient 46's initial visit to the underground pizzeria, Roxy Raceway closes down abruptly. We know this happens after Freddy's initial expedition underground for a few reasons. The first is some dialogue from Freddy regarding how long it's been since he's visited the raceway due to the gates that blocked access.
Now that I have been upgraded, I should be able to access the Roxy Raceway. I have not been there for a very long time.
Because the only entrance down underground is the elevator underneath the foundation of Roxy Raceway, it makes sense to conclude that Freddy's initial expedition to the underground pizzeria happens before the raceway is closed for reconstruction, after which Freddy would not visit the raceway until the events of the game. Another point to support the initial expedition preceding the raceway's closing can be found in the messages from the construction crew who are working on repairing the raceway. The second construction update, titled Power Drain, reads as follows. We keep getting these brownouts, so I got fed up and did a little investigation. It looks like something is drawing a massive amount of power from the worksite. We've traced a high voltage cable that disappears right into the foundation. There is definitely something under us. We're going to bore back into the foundation and find out what it is. The massive power draw from the construction site and the high voltage cable that disappears right into the foundation lends itself to being a symptom of patient 46's work underground, meaning that patient 46 is set up and working underground at this point in the timeline, meaning her and Freddy's initial visit underneath the pizzeria has already happened. The third and final construction update, titled Old Elevator, reads as follows. Today we broke through the foundation and found what looks like an old elevator shaft. Someone must have known about this, right? There's something down there pulling power. I'm taking a team down in the morning to check it out. Considering this is the last we hear of the construction team and the fact that the raceway is still closed down when we get to it in game, it's likely that the construction team's expedition didn't end very well. But what exactly happened to them? Once again, we can use Security Breach's affinity for environmental storytelling to fill in the gaps. When we finally make it to the underground pizzeria in-game, we can see exactly where the construction team left off their operation. The hole in the middle of the underground restaurant has construction barriers placed around it, as well as a crane positioned over top. We know this is where the construction team's work was cut short because we can see that some cargo is left hanging in place attached to the crane, as if catastrophe struck while they were working. Tell me, what do you think would have caused such a catastrophe? Who else? We don't know much, if anything, about the motivations of the blob. It seems to attack anything that's alive, but remains dormant when it's undisturbed. Notes in the Pizzaplex read, "It is drawn to sound." A construction team operating a crane, setting up equipment and making lots of noise would certainly be likely to attract our amorphous friend to visit. Once the blob has killed the members of the construction team, it returns to rest, only this time at the bottom of the sinkhole that acts as the only passage between the pizzeria and the mysterious structure underneath. This is then how Patient 46 becomes trapped under the massive animatronic parts, and where they and the blob remain until the events of Security Breach. Returning one last time to the fire escape ending, this is why I personally believe that the Vanessa atop the Pizzaplex here is a ghost, because at this point, and in regards to this theory, Patient 46 is still trapped under the pizzeria. Now the only question left is, why don't we see Patient 46 during the burn trap boss fight? In order to answer that question, we need to once again consider the structure underneath the buried pizzeria. An important thing to make very clear off the bat is that this structure is not a part of the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place building above it. The only access point to the structure is by travelling down the sinkhole and falling into the structure through a hole in the ceiling. Consider this, if the sinkhole wasn't here, how would anyone have accessed this area? The only answer is that there must be another entrance to the structure that we can't see, which also likely means that the structure is bigger than what we see in game. If you accept that, then you have your answer for where Patient 46 is during the final fight. They are down there, but likely in a different part of the structure, likely in order to stay hidden. Finally, I'll take a gamble and say that this structure underneath the pizzeria is none other than the sister location. This works considering the sister location is also a large structure hidden underground, and timeline-wise, we never really learned what happened to it after the events of the game. We don't know if it was demolished or repurposed. Likely, the place was left abandoned after the owner of the location, William Afton, went missing for 30 years, for some reason. And finally, isn't it interesting that in the most recently announced FNaF title, Help Wanted 2, we'll be revisiting the sister location. Even more interestingly, in that teaser trailer we can see a panel on the bottom right that seems identical to the ones we've seen as a part of the upcoming Ruin DLC. Glamrock Freddy colour scheme and all, which undoubtedly implies that the Pizzaplex may truly be built on top of not only the Pizzeria Simulator building, but furthermore on top of the sister location. Ruin is set to continue the story of the game past where this theory leaves off, but of Security Breach's 6 endings, only one can be canon. The Afton ending makes the most sense considering it's the only ending where both Chica and Monty are required to be shattered. Wounds that we see both animatronics will be carrying into the DLC. If the Afton ending truly leads into the DLC, we can expect to see the consequences of that ending take hold. Vanessa will still be in need of rescuing from the glitch trap virus, but this time, Patient 46, but at this point let's just call her Vanny, will also be on the prowl throughout the DLC, meaning it's possible that in Ruin, we will have to avoid 2 Vannys at the same time. That's definitely a way to address the frustration people had with Vanny's initial lack of presence in the base game. So what have we learned? Vanny is still an antagonist in this story. A lot of people were frustrated with how her presence in Security Breach was overhyped, only to have her show up so briefly. My theory you've spent roughly an hour sitting through today gives this absence, this omission of Vanny a purpose. Vanny wasn't really physically in Security Breach, but the effects of her actions can be felt absolutely everywhere in the story that's currently being told. From being the client who sent Silver Parasol the vintage circuit boards, to manipulating Vanessa, to unleashing the glitch trap virus into the Pizzaplex, to reviving the man behind all the tragedies of the past. The conclusion here is that Vanny isn't in Security Breach, but at the same time is absolutely everywhere in this story. Like a shadow. Like the shadow of Vanny. Most other theorists who have attempted to solve Security Breach have pretty much ignored Vanny as a part of the story at this point, and who could blame them? The game hardly had her in it. To most, Vanny was cut from her own game, especially considering Security Breach's massive pool of cut content This wasn't a hard thing to believe, but I really think, story-wise, this was all on purpose. Vanny was overhyped as the new antagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's, meaning going into Security Breach, people were really expecting her to show. But that would have made whatever she did end up doing not a surprise to the people following the story closely. Maybe I only speak for myself here, but I wasn't at all surprised to see Afton back in the flesh during Security Breach's finale, because I knew everything was set up to lead to this point, and I think a lot of people felt the same way. With Security Breach's initial release behind us, Vanny is no longer as overhyped as she was before, and a large majority of people going into Ruin are expecting the Mimic to be the main antagonist now, with Vanny pretty much hidden from the story as if she doesn't even exist anymore. And this is exactly what will work in her favour when whatever it is she's planning finally comes to fruition at the end of the Ruin DLC, because this time, no one is expecting it. After all, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. That's all I've got for now. Thank you so much for watching, it means the world, and I'll see you next time.